On the surface, the Sullivans looked like any other family caught in a messy divorce, but hidden within hundreds of pages of sealed court documents was a story of terror that the public was never supposed to see. Two children vanish from a quiet Nova Scotia home, and the only clues left behind are a pink blanket, a child-sized footprint, and a set of newly unsealed court documents accusing someone inside the house of violence. As the stepfather denies everything and the mother's story fractures under scrutiny, one question haunts investigators. Did Jack and Lilly wander into the woods, or were they never meant to be found? What if the quietest morning in a rural community became the moment two children vanished, leaving behind questions that refuse to fade, questions that press on your conscience, questions that force you to ask whether enough was done soon enough? Because on May 2nd, 2025, Lilly Sullivan, age 6, and her 4-year-old brother Jack were reported missing from their home in Lansdowne Station, Nova Scotia. And from that moment forward, nothing about this case has allowed the public to look away, not because of spectacle, but because of the unbearable weight of uncertainty, because two small children did not come home, and every hour that passed without answers added another layer of urgency, another quiet demand for accountability, another reminder that when children disappear, time is not neutral. Time either helps or it harms, and in this case, time has stretched endlessly. Because according to official reports, the children were believed to have wandered from the home while adults were inside, a claim that immediately set off one of the largest search efforts the region had ever seen, involving police, search and rescue teams, volunteers, dogs, helicopters, and countless eyes scanning forests, roads, and waterways. Yet, despite the scale of that response, despite the dedication of those involved, despite days turning into weeks and weeks into months, Lilly and Jack were not found. And that absence became the defining feature of this investigation, an absence so loud it echoed far beyond Nova Scotia, reaching international audiences who began asking the same hard questions. How did two children vanish without a trace? How does a search of this size produce so little clarity? And why does every new detail seem to deepen the unease rather than resolve it? Because as the search continued, investigators confirmed that a pink blanket belonging to Lilly had been recovered, a detail that on its own may seem small, but in a case like this, every object carries weight. Every item forces you to imagine moments you were never meant to picture. And while authorities cautioned against speculation, the public could not ignore the emotional gravity of that discovery, because it suggested proximity, it suggested presence. It suggested that at some point, Lilly was there, and yet she was not there anymore. And as months passed with no resolution, court documents surfaced that added another dimension to the public understanding of the environment the children lived in, documents that included allegations made by the children's mother regarding her common-law partner, allegations describing controlling and threatening behavior, allegations that were not tested in criminal court and resulted in no charges, but allegations that nonetheless shifted the focus of public attention, because when children are missing, context matters, household dynamics matter, and patterns matter. And even when claims remain unproven, their existence raises questions about what investigators must consider. And according to law enforcement, those considerations are ongoing, with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police stating repeatedly that the investigation remains active, that thousands of tips have been reviewed, that extensive video footage has been analyzed, and that dozens of interviews have been conducted, all while emphasizing that the case has not been classified as criminal and that no evidence has confirmed wrongdoing, a position that itself leaves many viewers conflicted, because if no crime has been established, then what explanation remains that accounts for the total absence of the children, the lack of sightings, the failure of searches to locate them, and the growing gap between the last confirmed images of the family together and the moment the children were reported missing? a gap that represents the most critical unanswered window in this entire case, because surveillance footage from the day before shows a seemingly ordinary family errand, a routine moment captured on camera, the kind of moment that never draws attention until it becomes the last confirmed record of normalcy. And when you place that image beside the reality that followed, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore, because the next day, 2 children were gone, and no witness has come forward to confirm seeing them leave, no definitive trail has been established showing where they went, and no explanation has satisfied the public's sense of logic. And this is where the weight of responsibility begins to press not just on investigators, but on all of us watching. Because it's easy to consume cases like this passively, but far harder to sit with the discomfort of what they represent. A reminder that systems can strain, that answers do not always come quickly, and that families can be left suspended in a state of waiting that has no clear end. And that waiting is not abstract. It is lived every day by those closest to Lilly and Jack, by relatives waking up each morning hoping for news, by communities replaying timelines in their minds, by people asking themselves whether a detail was overlooked or a moment misunderstood. And as public attention continues, law enforcement has urged restraint, urging people to direct credible information through proper channels rather than fueling rumor. A reminder that speculation can hinder as much as it can help. Yet the emotional pull of this case remains strong because it touches something fundamental, the instinct to protect children, the fear of unanswered loss, and the quiet guilt that creeps in when you realize how fragile safety can be. And that guilt is not accidental. It is part of why cases like this matter, part of why they demand sustained attention rather than fleeting outrage. Because Lilly and Jack are not symbols, they are individuals, and their disappearance is not a headline, it is an ongoing investigative reality, one that continues to evolve as new information is reviewed and old assumptions are tested. And if you're watching this now, it's worth asking yourself what staying informed really means, whether it means sharing verified updates, supporting responsible reporting, or simply refusing to let silence become acceptance. Because silence is often what unresolved cases drift into when public attention fades. And this case has not faded, not because of sensationalism, but because it remains unresolved. And unresolved cases carry a moral weight, a reminder that until answers are found, the responsibility to pay attention does not disappear. And that is why this channel exists, to document verified developments, to provide clarity without exaggeration, and to keep focus where it belongs. So if you value careful analysis, factual reporting, and continued coverage of cases that still demand answers, subscribe to the channel, stay engaged, and be a part of a community that understands that attention is not entertainment, it is accountability. And as this investigation continues, as tips are reviewed and evidence is reassessed, one truth remains unchanged. 2 children are missing. Their names are Lilly Sullivan and Jack Sullivan. And until they are found, the questions surrounding their disappearance deserve to be asked carefully, persistently, and without letting time erase the urgency of finding answers. And as the days stretched further, what became harder to ignore was not just the absence of Lilly and Jack, but the quiet discomfort that settled in whenever officials repeated the same careful language, phrases meant to reassure, yet unable to satisfy the deeper need for certainty. Because when authorities say an investigation is ongoing, what they are really saying is that the answers are still missing. And when months pass without resolution, the weight of that uncertainty begins to shift from shock to endurance, forcing everyone involved to live with unanswered questions that do not rest easily. And this is where the case enters a different phase, one defined less by search grids and more by patience, scrutiny, and accountability. Because behind every press update lies a family waiting. Behind every official statement lies the knowledge that children do not simply disappear into nothing. And yet, that is exactly what this case appears to show on the surface. 2 young siblings vanishing from a familiar environment with no confirmed path forward, no verified verified sightings and no conclusion that allows the public to exhale. And as investigators reviewed thousands of tips, many of them well-intentioned, some of them emotionally driven, the challenge became separating hope from evidence, because hope alone cannot guide an investigation, but without it, cases like this risk slipping into silence, and silence is the one outcome that benefits no one, not the family, not the community, and certainly not the children whose names must continue to be spoken if there is any chance of progress. And what makes this situation even more difficult is the restraint required when discussing sensitive details. Because while court documents revealed allegations of concerning behavior within the household, no charges were laid, and responsible coverage demands that distinction be respected. Yet ignoring those documents entirely would also be dishonest, because context matters, and investigators do not evaluate events in isolation. They examine patterns, timelines, and environments, especially when young children are involved. And this is where the public often feels torn, wanting answers quickly while also demanding fairness, wanting transparency without speculation, and wanting justice without jumping to conclusions. And that tension is felt in every update, every carefully worded statement, every reminder from police that they are following all credible leads, because credible leads are the currency of truth in cases like this. Not assumptions, not online theories, not emotional conclusions. And yet the emotional pull remains unavoidable, because when you imagine two children who should be growing, learning, and laughing, and instead picture empty bedrooms and unanswered phone calls, it becomes impossible not to feel a sense of collective responsibility. A quiet question forming in the back of your mind asking whether attention has waned too soon, whether pressure has eased too much, and whether continued focus could make a difference. Because history shows that some cases move forward precisely because people refuse to stop paying attention, refuse to let time dull urgency, and refuse to accept uncertainty as an ending. And that is why this channel continues to document verified developments, not to provoke fear, but to maintain awareness, not to accuse, but to ask necessary questions, and not to sensationalize, but to ensure that Lilly and Jack remain present in public consciousness, because forgetting is the one outcome that guarantees no resolution. And if you are still listening at this point, that means you care enough to stay engaged, care enough to follow details rather than headlines, and care enough to understand that long-form analysis matters in cases that do not resolve neatly. So take a moment to subscribe, because each subscriber strengthens the reach of responsible coverage. Each notification ensures you do not miss verified updates, and each engaged viewer helps keep pressure where it belongs, on the pursuit of answers. And as we continue examining this case, it is worth reflecting on what it represents beyond the facts. A reminder that safety cannot be assumed, that oversight matters, and that when children are missing, the obligation to seek clarity does not expire with news cycles, it deepens. And until law enforcement can provide definitive answers, until evidence leads somewhere concrete, this case remains open not just in official records, but in the minds of everyone who has followed it. And that openness is not passive, it is active. It demands attention, patience, and integrity, and it demands that we continue asking, carefully and respectfully, where are Lilly Sullivan and Jack Sullivan? What information has yet to surface, and what more can be done to ensure their names do not fade into the background of unresolved cases? Because unresolved does not mean unimportant, it means unfinished, and unfinished cases depend on continued awareness to move forward.